We can get through some things before we need to refer to him.
Right.
Okay, yeah, I'll call the meeting to order and comments from the public. None. Consider an act on request for adjustments to or relief from specific charges imposed by the district.
Nothing was
Nothing. Okay. The consent agenda. Are there any items to be removed for further consideration?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have a comment on number 4 and number 5.
4 and 5. Any others? If not, do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
moved.
Except for 4 and 5. A second?
Second.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Number 4, review and act on the minutes of November 2022 Board of Directors meeting.
Yes, on page 5, item 10. Top item. Talking about the letter from the city of Conroe, that should read Houston.
Okay, yeah. Okay, and then number 5.
Page 8. I don't know whether this got corrected once, Maureen, but on page 8 on the operating fund balance sheet, account 1280, it still has WJPA. In my printed copy. I thought that was corrected at one time. In the description.
Rename the account, yeah.
Okay.
That
May be a universal fix. I don't know.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, with those corrections or adjustments, we have a motion to approve 4 and 5.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
All in favor, aye. Opposed, nay. Okay, moving down to regular agenda, number 13, review and consider approval of district's fiscal year 21-22 draft audit report. John?
How are y'all?
Good job.
I gotta say, my 37 years of auditing is probably the most interesting mud audit I've ever seen. We got some abatement refunded this year, which is a
Yes.
significant number, about $1 million.
Yeah.
We got grant revenue, which may require a single audit. I haven't really looked into that, but in the coming years, it's a different procedure that we have to perform and it happens when federal and state, in some cases, money is expended, not when received, but when expended. So if you have if you expend more than $750,000 in federal and state monies in one given year, then we have to perform what they call a single audit, which has all these compliance issues. So that may come up 23 or 24.
I understand it. The grant money is the last increment to be expended.
Okay.
So it goes through the bond funds first. Then the donated capital,
Right.
and then,
Then in the grant money.
yeah, so that's.
Right. Because
Couple years
some
back.
people will have to watch.
Okay,
Yeah,
Yeah.
and if you spend 550 in one year and 550 in the next, no single audit required. So there may be a little bit of planning involved there. Of course, then we got our zero interest bonds, which just makes me smile every time I say that. And some contributions from other governments. So it was a fun audit to read, write, and do. You really challenged Jennifer and challenged me at the same time. I think we got good disclosures related to all that, but if y'all want to add to any of that, we certainly can. I don't think we really covered the grant money very well, but so if you'd like to keep an additional disclosure, then that would be put in there.
I think that would be appropriate. I didn't see it either.
Yeah.
And I think that would be appropriate.
Other than that, again, we did good audit. It was an interesting year for 67, and I was impressed.
So just a
$11
couple,
million in the capital project. Do our business. So,
just a couple of probably nitpicking items, but on the contents page for under Texas supplementary information, there's toward the 2/3 of the way down, says analysis of changes in long-term bonded debt. And then you go to page 42 and 43. And first of all, there's nothing on 43, so I guess that should be changed to just 42 only. And then secondly, the heading is different than the description.
Okay.
So they ought to be, whichever way you choose to do it, they ought to be the same.
Yeah.
And then on page 27. It's the notes, the financials on the bond analysis, the payment schedules.
Mhm.
The line that says at the bottom, debt service fund has 606.
Mhm.
That should read 633, 335. I don't know where that number comes from. Yes.
If you look at page 12, ending fund balance, the debt service fund is 50.
If you look at page 21. $633, $335.
That's the cash balance, right? We're talking about fund balance. So we got, it's, turning back to 12. We had a little, we had a few payables, internal payables and accounts payable that reduces. We have 633 in cash minus 27 and,
Oh, those are entries you made in the audit.
I believe they were already, they're probably due over taxpayer overpayments probably, I'm guessing, but I don't think we made adjustments there.
Well, the book financials as of 9/30, shows 633
In cash or in fund balance?
cash.
Yeah, and what we're talking about here on page 27 is we're talking about the fund balance.
Okay,
The ending fund balance.
let me see here. I don't see the 606. I say 607, 407.
If you go back to page 12, oh, we might have had a small adjustment. See, total equity, yeah, that 607, 407 ended up being 606, 551. I have to look to see what, if we made an adjustment to that.
All right.
I had small adjustment related to property tax receivable or something.
And then lastly, on page 36. Item number 2, retail rates. The surcharge for the GRP should read, instead of 303, it should read 320. And the wastewater rate, where it says 485, should read 553.
That becomes effective this month, 553. We want to include it on this.
Is this the rate that we charge the?
45, it was, so
Okay,
This
good
month.
point. Yep, good point.
320, I can't quite remember. Last year.
That was,
Changed September 1.
and we're September 30th, so
Yeah.
that needs to be included.
Right,
You're right, the 485 should remain.
so just the 320.
Correct.
Okay.
Anything else, Paul?
No,
Anybody else have anything?
That's 603. The 320.
that's probably a universal fix also.
Yeah, it's that 303.
John, you have anything else to add?
Hope we get an approval so we can, get it finalized in the next couple of weeks. If y'all have any other changes, you might, let Jim or Maureen know and get them to us and we'll get them incorporated and, get it filed timely with TCEQ.
When does the current contract for your company expire?
They're on year to year right now.
Yeah, we have 1 year, so we will be, trying to renew, this spring summer. All right.
Okay, with that, do we have a motion to approve
So moved.
and a second? Any further discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Got it. I'm glad you had a good time with
Appreciate it. I'm sorry.
it. I said, I'm glad you had a good time with it this year. Okay. 14, grant exemptions from taxation for 2023 and the adoption of a resolution in connection therewith.
Your consideration of your tax exemptions. This is the exemption that will be taken into account when you get your tax bills from October. Easy to talk about exemptions in January, but they don't show up, the impact of it doesn't show up much later in the year. So y'all, as other groups in the Woodlands, have adopted the maximum 20% over 65. I'm sorry, maximum 20% residential homestead exemptions, and then so I think you're at 20,000 on your, yeah, there it is. 20,000 on your over 65 and disabled exemption.
How many have 30, how many MUDs in the Woodlands have 30,000?
So it was just MUD 47, and then yesterday MUD 60 voted to go up to 30,000 as well.
I move we raise our over age 65 and disabled exemption from 20,000 to 30,000.
As well as to maintain the 20%
Correct.
residential homestead.
Okay, do we have a second? Second. Okay, further discussion? How's that going to impact our revenues?
Yeah,
It's
Yes.
never material. I mean, unless you got a district that's all, just an active. Yeah, then it's not material. Gene, maybe.
Yeah, you have 931 accounts and that equals to like $14,430.
okay.
For your over 65 and disabled.
Okay, Paul just mentioned about 15,000, so not a big number. Okay, any other discussion? Then all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Thanks, Paul. Okay, 15, receive the Sanjak report.
Good afternoon. I'm going to pass it over to Dan, who's going to cover the strategic plan, and then he'll pass it over to Ed, who'll cover the next three items. I'm just here to mediate. And answer questions about your report and answer questions about my.
All right, there's no questions for Chris. Quick update on wastewater strategic plan. So we've been at this study for over a year now. Really appreciate the time, all the stakeholders involved, all yourself and the discussions and input throughout that process. On page 48, your packet, there is a one-page summary, a few exhibits attached. That's primarily what I want to bring your attention today is during the January 10th stakeholder meeting, SGRA provided recommendations on path forward. Those recommendations were voted on by the stakeholder members. And again, that's just the voting stakeholder members, the 11 MUDs. And yeah, basically, I just want to make you aware of those because in February, there will be an agenda item on y'all's MUD for, I guess, approval of those recommendations and essentially moving forward to a vote in March by the trustees. So bottom of page 48, the first bullet there is to move forward with further development and a phase 2 of a new membrane bioreactor MBR plant adjacent to treatment facility number 1. And that would be all constructed in one phase in 2027. This is what we've been referring to as alternative 9 throughout this process. An additional kind of stipulation on that recommendation is for phase 2, we are looking to up to $500,000 for a cost of a phase 2 and complete that work within a 6-month period of time. So this is a very shortened phase 2, primarily looking at what the capacity of the new plant needs to be, further refinement of the cost estimates and the rate impacts, and that piece of it, along with further kind of optimization throughout looking at just alternative 9.
Question, is this phase 2 going to include some public information and town hall meetings with the public?
At this point in time, I don't think we plan to do a town hall during phase 2, but that is something that we've been discussing. When and what does a community engagement plan look like for this overall program? So I think that's something that's still up for discussion and how that all gets pulled together.
Bring in working with the trustees,
Public Education Committee.
Right.
get out that message there.
On the next page, at page 49, that is the exhibit just showing a very high level preliminary layout of what alternative 9 would look like. But that would be built on adjacent land to be acquired next to plant 1 and built in all one phase. That first bullet, moving forward, alternative 9 into phase 2, that was a majority vote for during the stakeholder meeting. So 9 out of the 11 voting members of that stakeholder group essentially approved that recommendation. There was 2 MUDs that did not. One being MUD 386, the other being MUD 46. The next bullet to touch on is proceed with land acquisition adjacent to wastewater treatment facility 1. So that is moving forward in the near term to start acquiring that property. That was a unanimous vote on that one. Also commenced the preliminary engineering on the conveyance alternative that came out of this wastewater strategic plan, which there's an exhibit of that on page 50. And that is to look at constructing a new all gravity conveyance line from a little south of Woodlands Parkway down to new treatment facility 1 and the ability to eliminate up to 5 lift stations. So that is something that we see going directly into the preliminary engineering phases to further define the routing, flow lines, the land acquisition that may need to occur with that, and further details, cost estimating, et cetera. And again, that one was a unanimous vote of all stakeholders. So, and I guess before I forget, one other resource that y'all should have available on the Google Drive is the draft report that our consultant has put together for this wastewater strategic plan. It includes everything from back in November 2021 when we started this up till now. It does not include these final recommendations and conclusions that came out before the January stakeholder meeting, but it also has numerous appendices associated with that. So if there's anything in there you have questions on or comments, feel free to reach out. It's something we're looking to finalize here end of the month, early next month. So a lot of information. Is there any questions that I can help answer at this point in time?
Anybody have any questions?
So the phase 2 for the next 6 months. Is the stakeholder committee or group going to meet to discuss some of these milestones, or what's the intent?
So at this point in time, the intent is not to bring the stakeholder group back together.
Right, the intent is, the original stakeholder group was put together originally to go from, well, figure all this out as y'all did, and then get down to one or two alternatives. Phase two was going to be a longer, more in-depth study because we figured that originally there was going to be multiple alternatives to study. At this point, there's really just two items on the table, which is capacity and then looking at various financing options, if you will. So those two we'll just take care of. And then what we're going to do is just like Dan has been doing every month, bringing updates where we're sitting to all of the MUDs at that point in time. So rather than bringing the stakeholders together to talk capacity and go back and forth, we're going to go off of basically what we see in the system, do a traditional engineering study, work with Howard Hughes and see what the capacity needs to be and bring that back to us.
And I thought also one of the objectives was to see there's a 30% contingency factor in here for engineering. Is to try to shrink that 30%. As we get closer and get more definition, we should be able to do that, shouldn't we?
You should be. And that's one of the financing options that I've meant in broad terms is by the baseline alternative, you know, it's 30%. I know we're not looking at it, but it should have been higher. So with the alternative 9, if we can define where some buildings may go and various things, we may be able to take that a little bit lower from the 30% at this point in time.
And I would say typical standard that we look at, even at a preliminary engineering phase, is still having a 30% contingency. So I would say the contingency may stay at 30%, but the refinement and confidence in the raw costs might be higher to where it could bring it down that way too. As we get into further analysis on, you know, what, quantities of a certain material might need for a project, you could increase that confidence on the base cost, but overall contingency may still be 30% at the end of phase 2.
Yes, I'm trying to, after having voted for it, I'm trying to go back now and analyze what are we getting for $500,000 in 6 months in schedule? 6 months down the road from where we are today. We're not gonna get more definition on costs. Are we gonna know anything different on the alternative? The repair and replace?
We'll have better definition on capacity, which is going to take some time to run traps. And we will have, once we have the refinement on capacity, then we have a better feel for the size of the basins and the membranes, the headworks, you know, all the mechanical and physical features of the plant where we can buy that construction cost down as best as possible, knowing that we're still 3 years out from construction.
Yeah, but as you point out, it's not really 3 years by the time you back it all up, you know, and you still haven't addressed the public education piece of it, and that's going to eat into that time.
Right. Now, I don't know a whole lot about the communications plan that the communications committee put together. But I know it's at some point, the information that's the basis for needing a new sewer plant is going to be starting to be conveyed out into the public. There was some conversation at the MUDs yesterday as to when that actual public education might start. And Brian, I thought I heard 2025 or 2024.
Yes, I can't recall.
Because if you do it too soon, you're going to have to do it all over again because people will have forgotten. New people have moved into the area.
Well, that's just one thing to add to it. Any bonds for the wastewater strategic plan at this point are not proposed until late 24, early 2025. So we have enough cash on hand, we think, to get us through the initial stages of design before anything's needed. And so if we, part of it is now, if we educate now, then in basically a year, 2 years from now, are we going to have to redo that message?
We will.
Right. So residents may not be the same in all cases. So it's a timing issue. But I agree, though, we do need to work with Jim to see. I guess Eric as well.
Jim and Eric. And whoever whoever continues on the communications committee,
Yeah,
public education committee, whatever they're calling.
Any other discussion, questions?
Just add one thing real quick, the 500,000 for phase two, even if there wasn't a phase two and we went straight to preliminary engineering, this work would still be done in that PER phase. So all we're really doing is just pulling a small piece of that preliminary engineering out and doing it by itself. All these, it's not $500,000 going to waste. Just FYI, it is for a purpose that would be done one way or the other.
yeah, I understand.
Okay. Thanks, Dan.
Yep, thank you.
Chris, well, go ahead. Oh,
Well, I guess I have a question on Chris's report. Yeah.
He thought he
Page
was-
43.
He thought he was gonna sneak out.
Which page 43?
43.
Yes.
About the middle of the page there, wastewater treatment plant number 2, tertiary filter, and it says on hold. What are you waiting for?
Actually, yesterday, we talked with Dan, we've released that project to start next year. And the reason we put it on hold is because the original strategic plan did have a consolidation option.
Right.
Didn't want to waste the money, but of course, the problem with putting stuff on hold is that project is now, I think, 1.2 million higher than it was before. So we do have that, but we are looking to release that. We have to go through and fine tune some design on that, but it should be released for construction. I think it's actually January of next year, about a year from after we do the bidding there.
Okay.
And just as a note, a lot of these projects that we did have on hold, once we're getting a more defined approach like alternative design and conveyance, we are going to be releasing projects to go to construction now.
okay. Chris, do you have anything else? Ed, do you have anything to add to it?
Yes, on the other three items, the update on the infrastructure funding. The omnibus bill was passed by Congress late last year. It did have the funding, it had the project approval in it for the Bear Branch Dam, the 3.6 million that Congressman Crenshaw was pursuing. What we don't know yet is the timing of the appropriation. But that it's not that big a deal to us because we weren't planning to start engineering until August, September of 2023. So we have some time to work that out. Plus we have some things to work out with the Corps. The other larger federal funding for infrastructure, the biggest issue that we're seeing, and you've heard this before, is most of those funds are going to small communities, disadvantaged communities, and also entities that have an administrative or an enforcement order from the EPA. You have none of those three. We've had a conversation with our federal consultant and talked to them about options on what can we do to maybe get some new legislation to help change the funding formula. There's some positives. He's got a visit with the congressional delegation from this area to see if they're interested in helping carry that. We also have the potential of other river authorities and municipalities that don't fall in those three categories, might be interested in helping with pushing some legislation. So we're pursuing that. Bear Branch Dam low flow vault update. If you'll recall from our meeting back in November, I mentioned to you all that we had ordered the vault lid. It had a 13-week delivery time, so it's expected in March. Plans are essential, or they'll be complete by the end of this month. And we should have a contractor in time for when the vault lid arrives to start that process. Bear Branch Dam, there's a report in your packet. Let's see, page 61. Page 61 shows that they've started surveying, they've started pulling other information together for the hydraulic models. We're 8% into the project, and nothing has been invoiced today. Be happy to answer any questions.
So on that meeting that occurred on page 60, can you tell this board who was involved in that meeting?
The kickoff meeting,
I don't know what it is.
you're talking about the November 29 meeting?
Yes, I guess.
Okay. That had, Woodlands Water representatives, so Jim and Mike were there. It had a number of, couple of SRA folks, myself, Greg Lushbaum. Dan was there. And then we had 3 different representatives from LJA Engineering, project manager Donnie Reed, Chad Johnson, and one other gentleman,
John Brown's.
John Branch. And basic purpose of it was to make certain they had a clear understanding of the scope. They had a clear understanding of the schedule. They were issued their notice to proceed. And they had a survey crew starting within a week of that meeting, even though we were going into the holidays.
What was, your take on this meeting? I mean, did it go
I
satisfactory?
think so, yeah. Everybody seemed to be finally on the same page.
They were heavily reminded of the schedule, 9 months.
I saw the surveyors yesterday on the dam, surveying the dam at Woodlands Parkway.
Oh, good.
Good.
Thank you.
Ed, anything else?
No, sir, unless you all have more questions.
Okay, anybody else? Any questions? Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Okay, Brian, attorney's report.
Only thing I have under the attorney's report is brief legislative update. Session has begun. Bills are starting to be filed. When you're watching closely what happens with that $33 billion surplus, there's been discussion about additional property tax rebate. We'll see how that would be structured and what impact, if any, it would have on our districts, but more to come there early in the session.
Yeah.
Happy to answer questions. I do need to cover items 17 and 18 with y'all as well.
Okay, before we get there, any questions for Brian? If not, go ahead, Brian. 17.
All right, 17, you'll see the memo and the red line of your policy on pages, I believe it's 62, 68, somewhere in that area. This relates to the legislation that was passed in response to Winter Storm Uri. You recall after that bill was passed, we talked about it was fixing a problem that we didn't have in the Woodlands. We didn't turn people off. During Winter Storm Uri, we didn't impose late fees for folks who had bills that were due during Winter Storm Uri, but apparently there were some water suppliers who did, which led to the legislation. The legislation tasked the PUC, the Public Utility Commission, with preparing rules to implement the bill. PUC has finally adopted those rules, and the requirements for payment plan and the parameters and interest rate and all that stuff. We went ahead and put that into all of our districts' rate orders or policies, so that if we have one of these very rare extreme cold weather events in the future, it'll be very easy to flip to that part of your policy or rate order and be able to see what the requirements are versus having to go dust off PUC rules and figure out what you're supposed to do. So that's the purpose of the policy change, and we do need a motion to adopt the amendment to the policy.
Okay, do we have such motion?
So moved.
Second. Okay, all in favor, aye. Opposed, nay.
Great, thank you. And item number 18, the annexation, that is pending with the city. It was filed. I think I reported that last time. So they are performing their review. They're extremely slow with the city right now. So their traditional 90-day review period is not being abided by. So I would not be surprised if you run over that,
Okay,
but we'll continue to press them.
okay. See, Dan stepped out, so I assume he has nothing new to add to it. Okay. Number 19, receive update regarding the status of the Bear Branch, Panther Branch, and Research Forest Drive Drainage Improvement Project, and authorize any action in connection therewith.
I think it's a carryover from a year or two, and I don't think there's anything to add to it today.
Yeah, it's really a question, do y'all want to keep that on? It's kind of being covered as part of the River Authority
Right.
report, so it may be duplicative at this point.
Okay. Let's keep it on there, mostly for public consumption, knowing that, you know, if there's anything that doesn't get covered in the Sanjack report, then we have this option to discuss it.
So,
Okay, thank you. General manager report. yeah.
Okay. Um, Wanted to report at the trustee meeting, there was a discussion regarding the November Lone Star election and the fact that John Yours was a candidate for place 7, I think, Woodlands rep, seemed to win the election and then got notice from Lone Star's legal team that he was not an eligible candidate and would not be seated in that position. The trustees had a lengthy positive discussion about, well, maybe it would be appropriate for them to appoint him. So they agreed to send a letter, Bob Lux to provide a letter to the Lone Star Board recommending they appoint John to that position. In order to free him up for that, he has submitted his resignation as of Friday of last week from the MUD 36 board. So that will be acted on this afternoon. And that we put out a press release on that topic, and the Community Impact picked it up in their digital online version today. Houston Chronicles picked it up. So good news on that end. We also talked about this topic with our Chamber of Commerce last week at their monthly board meeting. They are having a business advocacy council meeting Friday morning. This is the group that deals primarily with legislative and business issues for the chamber. I will be attending that meeting, recommending that they consider offering similar support for the District 7 position, John Yours, and taking that back to their full board for action. So we'll see how that goes.
Okay. Have we heard any or gotten any kind of indication how the board views our request for seating John?
No, it was just delivered last week and I have not heard anything from them. The Public Education Committee also presented to the trustees their yearly strategic communication plan, which was approved by the trustees, and we'll be providing that to all the MUD directors from Shelley soon. I reported that we had a meeting the first week of January with Harris Galveston Subsidence District staff talking about satellite imagery, University of Houston news story regarding subsidence. They informed us that they have been working with U of H and SMU getting satellite imagery and satellite data regarding subsidence in their area, and indicated it's become very, very reliable. And they had an interest in putting together a consortium with us and them, and maybe HARC and maybe Lone Star, maybe Township or others to try to get more localized data and see how that might be used. So more to come on that. Also, I referred to some, I think 3 compliment letters in our packet that I think are also in your packet. So always happy to present those. Talked about a brief news story on water and sewer rates at the city of Oak Ridge. They kind of reached a tipping point with their water and sewer rates and are looking at an increase. Last but not least, I wanted to let you know MUDs 47 and 60 are looking at a kind of a year in or look back over the previous year message to their customers. So our public education group has put together a 1-page template that I wanted to let you guys know about, or other MUDs know about. And if you're interested in putting some message out to your customers, we will put that on your agenda for next month with samples of what the template looks like and what other MUDs have chosen, or at least MUD 47 and MUDs, 47 and 60. So
I'd like to see that.
yeah, I think it's worthwhile. So we'll and let me suggest, if you've got ideas that you think are newsworthy that you would like to see on there, let us know. Let John Geiger know, and we'll put that on the draft template we share with you at your next MUD meeting.
Okay. Any questions for Jim? Thanks, Jim.
On a related issue, I know the city of Magnolia has put a temporary hold on all developments. There's no water. They don't have any water. And they're one of the protagonists in this lawsuit. But I wonder whether this would be a good place to put one of those sensors, because you're starting at, an area that is relatively stable right now. But with all this, and they intend to produce like 1 or 2 wells a year for the next few years, to see what the impact might be going forward on
Subsidence. Interesting idea. Yeah, I think worthwhile. I don't know how that would get implemented, but.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? If not, Paul, the trustees report.
I think we've talked about most of the things that occurred during the meeting at various points throughout this meeting. And nothing stands out beyond that, so I'll just leave it at the written word here.
I'm going to bring to your attention that they did hire a new GM at the trustee meeting. So Eric Peterson will come on February the 6th, and then we'll go through several months of training and transition. So,
Okay. And we did pass around his resume. So any questions spurred that resume that you'd like to ask Jim?
You won't tell me disappear. Oh, okay, well.
No, I'll still be around.
Are we, and this is probably more like you, Brian, aren't we required to post a position before hiring? There's no requirement?
The district's got, Orleans Water, through its authority through the interlocal agreements with Grease Buds, has the ability to hire a general manager. That's authorized under the water code under 49 to hire a general manager. That there's not separate requirements for how you necessarily go about that. So you guys.
So the law doesn't state that you have to post and hold that open for 30 days or anything that kind of thing. Okay. Okay. I want to make sure we don't get any trouble. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Are we going to be seeing Eric come to some meetings or?
Oh, yeah,
something,
he'll
or how-
be attending the meetings beginning of February.
Okay, good. Do we need to recess?
No closed sessions necessary.
Okay, so we don't have to reconvene. Any items to be placed on the future agenda? If not, we stand adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ron.